When you're selling the all-new 1957 Ford, after you've told the story of Ford's modern styling, interior roominess, comfort, safety, and convenience, sell the hidden values. To do this, you have to learn the story of the inner Ford versus the inner Chevrolet for 1957. And when you do, your confidence in the great Ford for 57 will increase. That's why we literally ripped Ford and Chevrolet apart to tell you the inside story. We tested them, measured them, tore them down, and compared. We checked the hidden values of the body, the chassis, and the power line. And then we analyzed this information to see what it meant in terms of results, the things that your customers want out of a car. We're just presenting the actual advantages we know we have over Chevrolet and what they mean in terms of customer benefits. Then if a customer says,
"I've heard a lot about that Fisher body,"
you might say, "Frankly, I'd like to tell you about the Ford body." Then go ahead and tell it. We can build a better reputation than our competitor because, truthfully, we've got a better body. For example, say to a customer, "Hear that solid sound when I strike the roof of a Ford? Now, hear that hollow sound when you strike the roof of a Chevy." Here is the reason. Ford roof insulation is a 1/2-inch sound deadener called amber light. Look at the thin asphalt-impregnated cardboard Chevrolet uses. And here is another Ford plus. Our inside roof is painted with a coat of prime to prevent rust. Chevy leaves the metal bare. Now let's look at the roof bracing. Chevy has just one roof brace, while Ford has 3. Chevy has 2 in their station wagons, while Ford has 4 in their wagons. And they are important, not only as braces, but as rollover bars in case of accident. Now, let's take chassis features, starting with the frame. If they could only see it, they would learn that Chevy passengers have to sit outside the frame 4 full inches, whereas Ford passengers sit 5 inches inside the wide contoured frame for double protection. Then look at the cross members. Chevy has 2, we have 5. In addition, Ford has these heavy gussets. They are diagonal cross braces tying the side rail and rear cross members together. These, plus the extra cross members, help prevent frame bending or twisting. Chevy has nothing similar to these sturdy gussets. 4 bulkheads inside the side rails give the Ford frame the strength of a battleship. To sum up, the Ford frame has 5 cross members, Chevy 2. Ford has 2 gussets and 4 bulkheads, while Chevy has none. And Chevy lacks the stabilizer bar, which is standard on all Fords. It controls sway and wandering on turns, making steering safer and easier.
Chevy must think it's important, however, because they put it on their Corvettes and special racing cars.
Incidentally, another exclusive in the low-priced field is Ford's straddle-mounted pinion gear. The pinion shaft is supported on both sides of the gear by roller bearings. A simple comparison would be to roll a stick weighted in the middle between 2 fingers. This double support means longer life and smoother operation. The Chevy pinion is supported on one side only. Thus, it is more apt to bend and vibrate. You could compare it to rolling the same weighted stick between the fingers of one hand. You can see how hard this would be to balance, and that it would be much more apt to bend and vibrate.
By the way, how would you tell the brake lining story? Fords are riveted, whereas Chevy uses a bonded brake lining. How would you answer a prospect on that one?
That's easy. Mr. Prospect, bonded brake linings are baked on and have a tendency to glaze with wear, producing brake squeal and much more noise than riveted brake linings. Proof is that Chevrolet service is replacing bonded with riveted linings when customers complain about brake squeal. Incidentally, Did you know that Ford has more effective brake lining area? 180 square inches to 157 square inches for Chevrolet. And speaking of inner brake components, Chevy has, to quote from their literature, a rib on the brake drum that overlaps the edge of the plate. When the wheel is in motion, centrifugal force throws the mud and water off, unquote. In contrast, Ford's inner brake components are sealed from water or dirt by a double sealing rib. Here's another hidden value that the prospect would never hear about if you didn't tell him. These muffler heat shields. Floor pan heat can go over 400 degrees without these shields. Imagine that heat going into the body. Chevy doesn't have heat shields. Well, that's the body and chassis story. And if you'd like to check it, just ask your mechanics. They'll confirm what I've said. Or check a Ford in the body shop should you find one torn down. See for yourself. Now, let's turn to the Ford Powerline story for 1957. Like the body and chassis, we have many features and qualities proven superior to competition. Let's start at the radiator. Ford has a 13-pound pressure cap on its radiator against 7 pounds for Chevrolet. This increases the boiling point of the coolant by 16 degrees over Chevy, resulting in better cooling at idle and slow speeds, which means less friction and longer engine life. A big plus to fleet owners.
By the way, how about that Chevy V8?
Well, this is a comparison of Ford's famous deep block V8 versus Chevy's shallow block V8. The deep central section and skirts of the Ford engine block extend much farther below the crankshaft center line than in the case of the Chevy engine. This gives nearly full circle support to the Ford main bearings, compared to less than half that for Chevy. It reduces vibration, makes a smoother running engine, and adds to engine life. Another point, a little technical but very important, is that Ford cylinder walls are 25% thicker than Chevy's, allowing more room for coolant, therefore providing better insulation against heat. Heat penetrates through the thinner Chevy cylinder walls more quickly, much like heat penetrating a thin frying pan quicker than a thick one. Remember, this additional heat eats up fuel and oil. Ford intake valves are 2 inches in diameter. Chevy's only 1 3/4 inches. This means that Ford can pack more air-fuel mixture in the combustion chamber, getting higher compression and more power out of each charge of fuel. This economy of power is also improved through Ford's use of free-turning valves. You see, Chevy has the old lock-in type valve. The rotary motion of the free-turning Ford valve wipes the valve and valve seat clean of carbon and gives more even wear, resulting in longer valve life.
Wait a minute. That's too complicated for me. I'm lost.
It's somewhat the same principle as rotating your tires so they will get more even wear. In addition...
Say, how about this fuel injection Chevy's got? How come we don't have anything like that?
Frankly, Chevrolet has a continuous flow pressure system, not true fuel injection. It is unlike other fuel injection systems in which a metering device injects exactly the right amount of fuel into the system at exactly the right time. A completely different power concept than what Chevrolet is offering. Here is how Popular Science compared Ford and Chevy engines. They make a direct comparison of the 245 horsepower engines and give the nod to Ford with greater piston displacement, higher compression ratio, maximum engine torque, and overall maximum torque multiplication of the transmission. And remember, Ford gets its 245 horsepower with a 4-barrel carburetor. Chevy has to go to an 8-barrel to get the same horsepower rating. And when it comes to top horsepower rating, Ford is ahead of Chevrolet with its Thunderbird V8 supercharged engine with 300 horsepower.
Yeah, and did you know that the Ford 6-cylinder engine has many of the advantages of the V8? For example, deep block design, chrome-plated piston rings, free-turning valves, super filter air cleaner, 18-millimeter spark plugs, And of course, the big advantage of Ford's short-stroke design. Chevrolet still persists in the old-fashioned long-stroke design that cuts down on power. Chevrolet's piston travels almost 10% further than Ford's and still doesn't give as much horsepower. 140 to Ford's 144. Meanwhile, Chevy's additional 10% travel causes greater wear on the piston rings and cylinder walls.
Wow, what made you such an expert on sixes?
I just got tired of losing six-cylinder sales when I should have had them.
Yes, product knowledge is what it takes, all right. But let's wind up this Powerline story with a comparison of rear axles. Ford offers 12 more rear axle ratios than Chevy. Ford tailors its axles to the body, engine, and transmission, whereas a Chevy buyer is limited to the axle that goes with one of the three transmissions.
Speaking of transmissions, how about that Turbo Glide Chevy's got? I understand that's really something new.
Yes, it's new, all right, but we know our Ford-O-Matic is every bit as good, and in many ways better. In fact, Ford-O-Matic is still superior in acceleration and passing from 30 to 60 miles per hour. Above 50 miles per hour, Chevrolet still doesn't have a kick-down feature for highway passing in either Turbo Glide or Power Glide. Furthermore, Ford-O-Matic has been proved in millions of road miles. Turbo Glide hasn't. Now, let's go out to the test track where we tested and compared the 57 Ford and Chevy. First, a Ford Custom 300 and Chevy 210, both six-cylinder with standard transmission, were tested for acceleration results from a standing start to 60 miles per hour. Ford, 14.84. Chevrolet, 14.94, practically the same. 0 to 70 miles per hour, Ford almost a full second faster. And now the results of fuel economy tests with Ford and Chevy 6s. Practically the same at low speed. At 40 miles per hour, a Ford advantage of 1 1/10 miles per gallon, which means that in an average year's driving, the Ford owner will receive a bonus of approximately 500 miles of free driving. In addition, the Ford 6 led Chevy all the way up the economy scale at 50, 60, and 70 miles per hour. Ford cars outdistance Chevys from a half mile to a mile per gallon. Ford also stands out when it comes to braking. Coming to a dead stop from a speed of 60 miles per hour, Ford cars stopped in an average of 200 feet. Another thing, Ford brakes outlast and outperform Chevrolet brakes by a wide margin. At 80 miles per hour, Ford standard and power brakes stood up well against Chevy's. Chevrolet standard brakes faded out of control after only 4 stops, and rear wheels tended to lock. Chevy power brakes faded even faster than standard brakes, whereas Ford's power brakes had less tendency to fade than standard brakes. And when it comes to ride, steering, and handling, the Ford also showed up well. Here's what Consumers Report had to say, quote, "The result of the 57 change is improved comfort and clear superiority over Chevrolet. Changes in the Chevrolet chassis are very minor. The ride remains uncomfortably bouncy on undulating roads. Chevrolet's riding qualities are considerably inferior to those of Ford. Ford has a gratifying close-to-the-road feel, which is lacking in Chevrolet. The Ford leans less than the Chevrolet in taking curves," unquote. All of which adds up to Ford's superior performance, which was proved at Bonneville, Utah, world-famous testing ground, where a team of professional drivers supervised by USAC and driving 1957 Ford stock cars broke 458 national and international records in a grueling 50,000-mile endurance run on a 10-mile circular track in less than 20 days. A test which proved Ford's superior stamina, durability, and performance. Well, that's the story of hidden values. The story of the inner Ford and Chevrolet. Body, chassis, power line, and performance results. Study your comparison booklets. Use the product information we've given you. In 1957, you've got everything it takes in a product to make this a great year for both you and your prospects. For in 57, you've got a new kind of Ford to sell. It is truly the fine car at half the fine car price. And your prospects will appreciate hearing the positive facts that prove it.